welcome to Mile High Discussions. My name is Hugh O'Bryan.
My name's Emily Harrison.
I'm Henry Kaufman.
I'm Ballard Kauffman.
And today we're going to talk about a couple of things. They may seem unrelated, but it'll be an interesting show nonetheless. First, in light of recent events with SpaceX, we're going to talk about space, sort of the commercialization of it and the laws behind it. And connecting with those laws, we're going to talk about international relations and how those are going to go forward in the future.
And just really quick, these guys are not actually siblings. Funnily enough, they have the same last name with different spellings. So,
yeah, funny coincidence. But anyways, so in case you guys don't know, SpaceX launched the Falcon Heavy rocket on Tuesday, and it's the most powerful rocket we currently have globally, and it could revolutionize modern space travel. So what do you think are the implications of this?
I think one of the biggest things is that we're going to probably see commercialized space travel in the next probably couple decades. I think that the costs are going to be going down, and I think that in the future more and more people will be able to afford these.
but like, where's the money going to come from? Like, wasn't NASA defunded a while back by the government? So how are we going to fund more space programs in the first place? You know, privatize it.
The SpaceX model is private industry and, private funding. So that's how that's working. I think, and then just another concern with that is like the global climate impact it has. I mean, these rockets use a ton of fuel, which has, a ton of carbon dioxide being released, which is inevitably bad. So is it like worth it to send people privately up to space?
Honestly, I don't think people are going to.
For the environmental impact.
But like, if you think about carbon dioxide issues, our government honestly right now does not care at all about environmental regulation. So honestly, I don't think that's as huge of a deal, like regulation and legal wise, as it could be. Honestly, like, we don't have a ton of fuel, and obviously that could create climate change issues. But
and also specifically for space travel, we have incredible global networks. We have geosynchronous orbit satellites that allow us to use our smartphones and computers. Wi-Fi networks are based on both fiber optic cables and, in some areas, satellites. And isn't that innovation sort of worth the slight cost?
Oh, that's definitely worth the cost of like putting rockets up there and getting those satellites up. But I'm saying, sending two super rich people up to go around the moon and feel gravity for a while, is that worth the carbon output, like especially going forward when we're seeing, these climate check things already having effects with bigger, more powerful storms that are doing more damage and causing more harm to human life. And I think maybe using our resources to send very wealthy people up into space isn't the best way to look at space travel, but using it to advance all of humanity and to advance the scientific world and our scientific understanding.
I mean, is it worth it? Then no, especially if it's privatized. But how can you even put money towards what could be, what you're asking for is for the private industry to, out of their goodwill, fund public missions to space, when obviously our government and our people have shown, and this is not just the Trump administration, this is also the Obama administration, and these are previous Republican administrations as well, have not put as much interest or time into NASA, especially as like after 1960 advancements, right? So how are we even going to expect in the first place that those resources are going to be used for the greater good? Ballard?
I mean, I hope that we are, and I hope that we do continue to fund things like NASA and our government science administrations. I think that's really important, and I think, there's no incentive for private people to go in space.
So then it's unrealistic
if they
to
don't
expect that they're going to normally do it.
Well, there's also the idea that, SpaceX is, as of December, was worth about $20 billion. Mm-hmm. And NASA's yearly budget is about $19 billion. However, I would argue that we've seen more space travel advancement from SpaceX rather than NASA. So shouldn't we be fine with SpaceX sending very wealthy people on a round trip around the moon if in the event that they pay lots of money for that, so that SpaceX can develop even more and like newer technology that could potentially take us to Mars or even beyond?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, because if you think about, these people are paying it and it's already a privatized industry, so it makes sense that there shouldn't be any sort of government implications besides obviously the environment. And while I know there are many like industries and other companies that face these like implications, like with the EPA and other large.
Actually, wait, did you know that the EPA had the word science removed from its mission statement? It
Really?
did. Yeah,
When?
it did. Actually, during, I think it was like April of 2017, Trump administration was like, we're no longer, it's not devoted to science anymore, which I think is actually pretty funny.
The EPA has a more a different
to interrupt.
focus than many of our science administrations. For example, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA, is separate from the EPA. But NOAA does climate research and wind research, ocean research.
Didn't you do an internship with them?
Yeah, I did an internship with them. So I'm sort of fine with that if we have more focused parts of our government. If we want to focus solely on climate research with one department and environmental protection with another, I would say I'm fine with that.
I mean, then, but how are we, so Ballard asked, okay, so you said something about using space for the greater good, correct? So obviously if our Environmental Protection Agency is actually not able to do what it's proclaimed to do, and maybe this privatized space industry that we obviously have right now is continuing to grow and rich people are being able to get it, how are we going to even be able to protect our own citizens, protect the environment if our EPA is running poorly? And then, I mean, it's not kind of an unanswered question, right? We have all these environmental issues, but there's no one who's taking the word. I think the problem with funding, Hugh, like Mars trips and funding rich people, Ballard brought this up, not just climate change, as he has noted, and not just like bigger problems for humanity in general, but how can we even put effort towards like colonizing another planet when we have so many issues here in the United States, in the world, when our carbon emissions are at the greatest? Now, why should we be even going to other planets if we obviously can't handle the one we're at now?
That brings up an interesting point. So Elon Musk, one of his big missions, he wants to create a colony on Mars. That was the only reason he created SpaceX, which is a really far out goal. But I would say it's likely doable in the next few centuries. But his idea, and I sort of agree with this, is that humans have only ever not been at war for about 30 years out of our entire history since we evolved and since we became civilized beings about 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. So one thing that we could do is we could protect ourselves by giving ourselves a second chance on another world.
But like, what if the world, if we're already struggling, if it takes us that much effort to even colonize the world in the first place, and it's not, I mean, maybe that would mean that humans have to be more thoughtful about the way they do things, obviously, because the planet does not have the endless resources that Earth does. I just think, like, if we move to Mars suddenly, even if we have, it's like a second chance. It's a second chance, but when you can't, like, when it's not like better change is happening here, why do you think better change is going to happen there?
Well, another thing I would like to point out is that we've really only been in our modern society for about 200 years since the Industrial Revolution. Now that may seem like a long time, but in the wider scope of things, that's the blink of an eye. And we've done quite a lot for humanity in general in just that 200 years. Look at the previous 1,000 years. We did almost nothing for human rights, and we did relatively minuscule things in technology up until the Industrial Revolution. So I think by the time that we're going to actually be scientifically capable of creating a colony on Mars, we may have already figured out those problems.
I think some of these issues are inherent to like the human like mind, and like some of them are like probably never going to be solved. Like I think some of the human rights issues that we're facing today, while we can continue to move in like the right direction, I think it's going to be a challenge. Like it's always going to be a challenge for us in order for like certain groups of people to be able to overcome some of the challenges.
Not just certain groups of people. It's hard for everybody because inherent bias, like bias is implicit, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like what you're saying, I think that biases will always remain there because it's just part of growing up in a society where they're so abundant. Like all these biases, you can see them, like media, everything, they're always there. So I think that like it's going to be very difficult for us to eventually like overcome those biases, if ever.
Well, if we won't ever be able to overcome those biases, then why should we focus on them? Why not do something else and put our resources towards something else? If we know we can't fix it, then why
So you're
should
just
we
going to
waste
exacerbate the problem, though?
Well,
Like,
no, we can
exacerbate it by you're giving more resources to it in the
No.
first place.
I don't think
By allowing-
colonizing Mars supports racism.
Yes,
I
it
think
supports
they're very
it supports
different.
socioeconomic inequality. Foremost, it also promotes inequality in that if you're not in the tech industry, like if you're an artist or if you're not an engineer, you're going to face huge job losses, which could have tremendous impacts on many people. I mean, then you're kind of just like also by putting, let's say that space, suddenly there were a ton of developments, millions, billions of dollars went into it, as in like maybe the budget quintuples, okay? And now you suddenly have all these people kids who are going into college and they're focusing on space, something that they're focusing on their planet that's away from them. And suddenly attention, I think, also gets diverted from the things that we have back home the problems that we have that need fixing. So simply by going to colonize another problem, I think colonize another planet opens the door to so many problems that we simply cannot address right now. And I'm not saying we need to stop developing the technology to move to space. I just think that even though we have these huge developments, it's important to take a step back and reflect and think about what those will have as implications. Kind of like DNA is having huge, we're talking about ethics a lot and genetics right now, right? And I think the ethics is really going to come into play really soon. And if we don't start the discussion now, it could create huge problems in the future.
And I'm going to disagree with you saying we're going to forget the arts and sciences. Like, our society will never forget the humanities. We've always had humanities in our society. I don't see a problem with more societies moving towards a engineering and scientifically minded community, because like we need to grow and like we got to continue to strive to become a more perfect society through become like equal rights and through humanities and through also learning through sciences and engineering about our natural world. And I think that's something that space provides us the opportunity to do, is to go, continue and work on our sciences, but we're not going to forget the humanities.
And I also think we can also look at the past. One of the biggest previous experiences that humanity has had with this was the discovery of the Americas. And if we hadn't discovered North and South America, we wouldn't have Hollywood today. And Hollywood is like this blossoming place for the arts and music. And we also wouldn't have Silicon Valley either, which blossoms science. So I think that while we still do need to focus on some problems and support equal rights and whatnot, I think we could open up incredible opportunities if we were to go off of Earth.
Yeah, sure.
Good. Well, I think that's a good ending note, Hugh. So maybe space does have those opportunities. Space maybe has those issues. I think we're going to have to move into law, though, and talk about maybe the legality of that second half. Anyways.
Yeah.
Any final notes, guys?
I think I'm good.
I'm good.
Good.
Nothing?
All right.
It's bright in here.
Hopefully you guys thought this first 15 minutes was interesting. I certainly did. What about
Yeah.
you guys?
Woo! Okay.
Really?
And then we'll be back in a few minutes with some more Mile High discussions.
One of the most important resources to our state is water, and it must be protected. Jobs in water quality are in high demand, and Emily Griffith Technical College, with help from Miller Coors, knows how important it is to have qualified workers helping to protect this resource. Want to be a part of it? EGTC has the right program for you in water quality management. In less than a year, you could be certified and on your way doing your part in protecting this most important natural resource. Go to emilygriffith.edu to start your career in water quality management.
Hi, once again, welcome to Mile High Discussions. We talked earlier a little bit about space and the implications of our new SpaceX developments, but while we did talk about economics surrounding space, we did not really touch on the international part, the international politics around space. And so I open the floor for discussion.
Yeah, so I think one of the really interesting things about the internationalization of space and this kind of global like society we've built in space is like the International Space Station, obviously, where a bunch of different countries have all contributed different pieces to the ISS, and together they've created this giant space station that orbits around our globe every day. So I think that that's an example of when we're able to kind of go beyond just our country, like with ourselves, and then reach into other countries and work together with them, creating this kind of internationalized setting where we can all collaborate.
I agree. I also think we can look at, 20 or 30 years ago, there was a NASA/Soviet project called the Vostok Apollo program, where through very intense international cooperation, we were able to dock a Soviet spacecraft with an American spacecraft in the height of the Cold War. And I think that sort of goes to show that even if countries have large problems on Earth, we can come together and do something incredible just a couple hundred miles above us.
Quick question for the two of you. So around the world, we've had a lot of people saying that World War III is impending, especially with the problems between North Korea, South Korea, China, Japan, and the United States. Do you think that similarly to the Cold War, that the United States and other nations could get past their differences and make sort of another international space station or something of the like in the future?
I think it'll be difficult. I mean, North Korea is so far behind, I doubt that they could launch a rocket and build a space station to put up there. But I think international cooperation is always a good thing, and like this space is this unknown frontier that nobody can really own, because we can't really stay up there and stay in the same spot and put like a building up there. And so I think the space is a great area for the world to cooperate, and I think there's going to be some problems in space. Like we have a bunch of space junk, and how do we regulate that? Whose responsibility is it to clean up? Whose responsibility is it? Why should we not keep sending stuff up there? There is going to be a point where there's too much space junk for the International Space Station. So I think space can provide us with great opportunities to come together and work together, like with the Soviet program.
Yeah. Specifically on the North Korea-America front, I think it'd be tough to draw comparisons with the Soviet Union and America. Reason being is that, like Ballard said, North Korea is much farther behind in technological and economic development. And the Soviets got a man into space quicker than us. They got a satellite into space quicker than us. Really, the biggest thing that we won in the space race was getting to the moon.
Okay,
but we had multiple losses before then. So I think it'd be tough to compare. Like, North Korea, while they may say that their space program doesn't have anything to do with their weapons development program, rockets can also be used as intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Mind if I interject real fast? I'm not just talking about North Korea, though. I'm also talking about the tension that the world is facing, right? Obviously, China, Japan, there are other countries out there that have pretty good space programs and that already have a lot of missions that are out there in the big black void. But because we have so many issues, my hesitation is just that it's not just that North Korea is the issue, it's just that there's too many problems floating around for us to come together.
I mean, we're already all together on the space station, and we know the space station will come down one day, and we'll have to put a new one. Hopefully, we'll decide to put a new one up and come together again as a scientific community to explore the world and explore the new frontier and explore space and explore our galaxy, because I think that's important, and we learn so much in physics and chemistry and everything about the natural world from that, and I think we can come together on issues. Now, do we come together on everything? No, and nobody's expecting anybody in the world to agree to everything. So I think this space does give us that unique opportunity to work together, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and sort of going on that, the ISS is going to fall back into Earth's atmosphere due to orbital decay probably in the next 5 years. It could be extended to 10 years. It's soon. It's actually been around for over 20 years since the first part went up, which is pretty crazy to think about. But there are already new plans in development to create a new international space station. And the USA is working with the European Space Agency to launch actually a space station around the moon as a step towards interplanetary travel. And I think one key thing is that I would be surprised if we were able to get very far in space without international cooperation, because it's extremely expensive. The NASA's the Space Launch System, which they're developing right now, it costs billions of dollars to develop. And honestly, SpaceX is pretty surprising in how much success they've had as a single company. But with the International Space Station, we've been able to come together to create something that really there haven't been any major losses with the space station. It's just been one major success after another, and I think we will continue that momentum to the moon as well, and hopefully to Mars.
I think it's important to continue that momentum.
Yeah. Like an interesting question off of that, though, is I'm kind of interested in seeing in the future if there's going to be more privatization of like these space station type things. Like obviously Elon Musk's really interested in colonizing Mars, but Jeff Bezos also has a space company that's I'm sure they're interested in building some sort of similar thing to like the International Space Station.
Yeah, I'm sure there's others that are international too, because I feel like there's been a lot of businesses, like top leaders and
I'm sure, and like if there's going to be like an increase in like privatization of like these space stations, where like maybe only select few, and it's not going to be necessarily held by like countries, like there's like a USA part, or there's like a Japanese part, or there's part on the ISS, but like instead maybe it's held by certain companies, right? So I'm interested in seeing that. Yeah, I think
that's interesting. I believe a company worked with the Japanese Space Agency and they're going to launch this soon if it hasn't launched already, but a ISS module that can hold space tourists. Ooh. It's the first space hotel ever created.
Weekend getaway in space. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Ballard and Henry, so you talked a lot about privatization. To what extent do you think that'll open job opportunities for students who are in high school and in college?
I mean, I'm sure there'll be lots of internships and lots of people when you're in elementary school, a lot of the jobs that you will be having and your classmates will be having don't even exist yet. So I'm sure there's going to be plenty of jobs that are created out of this, and I think it's going to, again, more potential for everybody and everybody to learn, and it'll be a new world and a new interplanetary or interspace world. Yeah.
I think like there's always like people, when they think of jobs, they're like, oh, I'm gonna be like an astrophysicist, or like some extreme like levels of mathematics are required, or something similar, like where it's very high, like a very high like intelligence level in order to be able to like perform the jobs. But I think at the same time there's still gonna be like a lot of like jobs that like people who like maybe don't like see that as a potential career option can still like participate in. both like in this maybe a space station, but also maybe here on Earth
Yeah.
in the future.
Specifically on the high school front, I honestly doubt a ton of jobs are going to open up for kids like us. I know I've emailed SpaceX multiple times for an internship, and they haven't even responded.
Yeah, why not? Come on, SpaceX.
Well,
why aren't
but
you
I think
responding
with,
to Hugh O'Bryan?
with this, all of these companies are extremely advanced. They're pushing the forefront of technology, and I think you need a bit more of a background than
but just
taking
like
AP physics.
obviously high school students, I think with openings in STEM fields are going to start to divert more towards aeronautics and engineering that has to do with that, you know?
Yeah, but if you go to most college campuses with an engineering department, you can see walls plastered with job opportunities and internships. But if you go to high schools, you might see one or two. And I think we need to put more of a focus on interning at a college level when you can actually do good
Then
for a
what
company.
can students do,
I think
all of you?
Get involved
guys
and
think?
learn about it. I
Yeah,
think is
exactly.
something that I can do. So I kind of have a question. Like, if we can get to the moon and we do get to the moon, do people get to own the moon? Like, if a private company goes to the moon, do they own the moon then?
That's an interesting idea. So there's a UN treaty. It's called the United Nations Special Convention on, I think it's territorial waters, but I could be wrong. And it essentially says that anything not claimed by a country is international waters, meaning that land on the moon, land on Mars, is land anywhere except for Earth.
Has anyone claimed the sun?
No, nobody's
that'd
claimed
be-
the
'cause
sun
that'd be
yet.
pretty hot.
But on that, that's nice. All of our rovers on the moon are our property, and we technically own those, so we can go anywhere on that. But if we step off of a rover, we're in international waters, and that's sort of messy territory for international law right now. So that's something we actually need to figure out in the next couple
But could
of years.
SpaceX become a country then?
That's a really interesting thought. What do you guys think?
I think that I'm not sure if they're lacking the government kind of type that you would expect for like a country to have. Like I think that if they were to become a country, there'd be like an immense amount of like additional like resources required for them to be able to like fully function as a country. But I think that that's something that's going to probably come up in the next couple of years as like they continue to go, especially towards like Mars and other planets.
Henry, on Earth, do private companies, I'm like terrible with economics, do private countries run under the work, like the state or the country owns the land and then the private company, purchases the land from the state? Like, would they even have the ability to be a country or to own that without it first being like a property of the United States?
That's also an interesting thought.
I mean, if you declared independence, the United States government probably wouldn't go for it.
The Constitution says you can't create new states out of the land of current states.
How about new countries out of the land of current states?
I would expect the same applies, but honestly, I have no idea.
Well, I guess that's up to our viewers to decide whether or not you think that SpaceX could buy the moon.
Yeah, how crazy would that be?
That'd be
Like
crazy.
the
That'd be
moon
pretty
has
cool.
minerals worth trillions of dollars, and imagine a company owning all of that. That'd be more economically powerful than most countries. That's mind-boggling.
Thanks for your time, guys. Thanks, Henry, Ballard.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Please, if you get a chance, follow us at Mile High Discussions on both Facebook, Instagram. We might have a Twitter page coming up too.
Oh, fancy. But yeah, do you guys have anything else to say?
No,
Thanks for watching.
No?
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for having
Thanks for having us.